Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The program will begin in a few minutes. Please move to your seats and help us start on time. As a reminder, please set your electronic devices to silent, but keep them at the ready so you can text or email your questions for our guest speakers to the address on the screen at askmetna@gmail.com.
The Signal and Cyber Museum Society is on a mission to preserve the rich history and significant contributions of Americans who have and do serve at Fort Eisenhower in the Signal Regiment and the Army's Cyber Corps. Now, more than ever, we must save these stories to educate the public, train present-day soldiers, and inspire future generations. Your support is vital to preserve this 160-year-old history and prepare young Americans for service in the 21st century. Visit secureourstory.org to learn more and join us in keeping our nation's legacy. Together, we can ensure our history lives on.
On silent.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a notebook with copious notes in the back that's been left here. If you're missing it, please come back to the back right of the room. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Colonel Mike Black, U.S. Air Force retired, Vice President of Defense, AFCEA International.
All right, good morning. Those that know me know that was a preparatory command, and you have to respond accordingly. So in the military, when we don't get it right the first time, we redo. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, thank you. It's great to be here, and welcome back. I know some of you had a chance to attend the session this morning by General Miles, and a great perspective on things with his Indo-PACOM experience. What I want to do, just real quick, is just introduce this session, this panel. It's my pleasure to introduce the moderator for this. It is Sergeant Major Jesse Potter, U.S. Army. He's the G3 Sergeant Major at Army Cyber. Sergeant Major Potter enlisted in 1994 and began his career as a chemical operations specialist, and also worked in the electronic warfare before reclassifying into cyber operations in 2015. He has served as a brigade command sergeant major for the 780th MI Brigade Cyber, and also the U.S. Army Cyber Protection Brigade. He's been the sergeant major for G3 and Army Cyber since March of this year. Join me in welcoming Sergeant Major Potter and his fantastic panel here with the representing the NCOs, the backbone of our military. And we even have a Navy chief up here, as Master Chief up here as well. So, Sergeant Major.
Thank you.
Yeah, you can clap, you can clap.
So I'm actually going to go digital rather than my note cards. So ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, fellow panelists, welcome to our discussion on empowering the enlisted force for the challenges of tomorrow. Today we gather to explore critical topics of GEMSO and cyber electromagnetic activities. Our esteemed senior leaders here today will share their perspectives, drawing on their wealth of experience. Throughout this hour-long panel, we'll delve into the enlisted training development and operational excellence, but our focus extends beyond the present. We're here to discuss the current and future battle space. Joint electronic warfare spectrum operations and cyberspace electromagnetic activities are at the forefront of our efforts. As we navigate this complex landscape, we will inform our partners and peers at the unclassified level, again, unclassified level, fostering valuable insights and considerations. Before we dive into our discussion on GEMSO and SEMA, I would like each one of the panel members to introduce yourself and share a little bit about your background and why it relates to this critical topic.
Good morning, everyone. All right. I'm Sergeant Major Agbula. So I am a recent graduate of the Sergeant Major's Academy, class 74. Still got that new Sergeant Major smell on me. But previous to that, I was the Spectrum Manager, 25 Echo at the 101st Airborne Division and the 82nd Airborne Division. I've been a Spectrum Manager for a little over about 12 years. So I've had a good mix of Spectrum managed stateside and OCONUS, so working with our partner nations in Germany and Korea.
All right. So I'm Kevin Fouts. I'm currently the MI Battalion Command Sergeant Major at 75th Ranger Regiment. I came in the Army as a 98 X-ray, then being to go into signals intelligence analyst with the Arabic background. So really, how I got into EW for a long time was looked at as kind of a traitor to the SIGINT when I started doing electronic warfare in the 2004 and 5 timeframe, which what we're doing this week is we're celebrating 10 years of Army Cyber existing. And again, I just said I've been doing electronic warfare since 2005. So I was able to do a lot in pioneering and understanding how the Army gets back at conducting electronic warfare. Because at that point in time, Army had divested and really relied on Air Force and Navy and the other services to provide their version of electronic warfare. So for the last 18 years, I've really focused, again, in pioneering capabilities, but additionally then how we integrate it all the way, full spectrum operations. It was big in electronic support to start with, but definitely have to have a huge focus in electronic protection, electronic attack. So many years of experience, and then now the best part of the job is leading and mentoring the future formations and how we integrate EW, cyber, and all these great capabilities for the maneuver elements.
Morning, Master Chief Ruben Montano. I've been doing EW and cyber now for most of my career. In 2006, I was part of NSW, Naval Special Warfare, doing tactical EW throughout about 13 combat deployments. I also qualified in 2007 as an offensive on-net operator and helped establish the first Title 10 offensive cyber capability within Naval Special Warfare. That's kind of the background that I'm coming from.
Hey, I'm Joshua Gendron. Matt Damon once famously said, if you can't spot the sucker in the room within your first 5 minutes, then you're the sucker. So I think that's the role that I'm fulfilling on this panel based off of what everyone just said.
All right, so I got to say, we got a diverse group of senior non-commissioned officers and petty officers here today. But before we dig into the meat of our discussion, I want to baseline the audience because we use a lot of terms sometimes, and sometimes we fail, even as senior non-commissioned officers, to dig into our doctrine and actually read what the doctrine says we actually are supposed to be doing. So according to Joint Pub 312, GEMSO is the coordinated efforts of EW and joint electromagnetic spectrum management operations to exploit, attack, protect, and manage the electromagnetic environment. Unique to the Army, and yes, only the Army, so our joint service partners, Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps, can't forget about them, don't use the term SEMA. SEMA is an Army term, SEMA is an Army concept. FM 312 describes cyberspace electromagnetic activities, SEMA, is the process of planning, integrating, and synchronizing cyberspace operations and electromagnetic warfare in support of unified land operations. By integrating and synchronizing cyberspace operations and EW, friendly forces gain an information advantage across multiple domains and lines of operations. So now that we've level set everybody with the actual terms about what we're going to talk today, my first question is going to be for the entire panel. This question, as the Army shifts from coin to large-scale combat operations focused on near-peer adversaries and our pacing threat, what critical things in and through the electromagnetic spectrum do we as a force need to focus on? And I'll start with Sergeant Major Agbula.
Thank you, Sergeant Major. So I believe, this is Sergeant Major Agbula speaking, we need to focus on two things. The first being is, how do we operate in a congested environment? Because we're going to operate in a joint environment, and everybody's going to want to bring their toys to the table. Everyone is going to want to bring all their equipment, but it is not possible for everybody to operate what they want to operate at the same time. And just looking across the world, seeing what's happening, Ukraine, Russia, we cannot operate how we used to operate. Gone are the days where we had like the humongous tent complexes where, you know, the G6 had its own 10.5, the commander had a 10.5. It's a huge electronic signature that we're putting out. And it only takes a near-peer enemy seconds to detect that. And you see the videos, how Ukraine is giving Russia the business because, you know, they're easily protectable, easily detectable. So how do we operate in a contested environment? Secondly, we have to protect our ability to use spectrum. So beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war, Ukraine was giving it to them. Not so much now, because Russia has adapted. They saw what Ukraine was doing. They have fixed actions in place to do that. So we, in turn, have to pivot also to make sure that we are not, the enemy cannot adapt to us. We have to protect our ability to utilize spectrum. And then finally, it would be, how do we operate in spectrum constraints? Because we're not in Afghanistan anymore. We can't willy-nilly use everything we want to use. China, Russia, other near-peer threats, they have the ability to stop us. They have the ability to jam us. They have the ability to stymie us. If your equipment goes down, what use are you to the commander? If the commander can't talk to his other commanders, how is the fight going to go? So we have to understand the environment, what the enemy capabilities are, and have fixed actions in place, ways to remedy that.
All right, the approach I'm going to go with this one, so I definitely agree with all the points there. This question was posed to really the Ranger Regiment when we went to NTC last year. We're always been expected and viewed as a CT unit and doing COIN in Afghanistan. So how do we quickly shift and modify, adapt our operations to support in a LISCO environment? So we went to NTC, and we showed that, I think what it comes down to is it's mastering the basics. I'm looking at this as the individual user, so how the EW professionals are going to conduct their mission and support the maneuver elements. And we're able to show that through mastering the basics, through same thing, understanding the equipment to its fullest, understanding, just studying the enemy and learning, hey, there's a signal we got to get after. So how we identify it, how we then are able to maneuver, whatever, some kind of capability, some direct action or indirect fire to eliminate that. So it was showing that we demonstrated we were able to adjust, like all the years of experience that we had with a solid baseline, we're still able to adapt to the new enemy at different fronts. So it goes down to the training and preparation and mastering the basics and just applying it to a different battlefield.
Yeah, so I think along those lines, there were a lot of key lessons learned in the counterinsurgency efforts that can be applied to the new problem set with more knowledge base of the target, and that the target is going to bring some of their own capabilities to bear that we didn't see in COIN. I think one of the key aspects here is that the lessons that we learned were fairly inexpensive in the counterinsurgency fight because of the level of war and what the enemy brought to fight. The key here is that lessons are going to be way more expensive, a lot higher cost to the U.S. if we're learning them after engagements have begun. So the key here is, what are we doing in phase 0 in preparation for that conflict?
Yeah, so again, agree with everything said. I'm going to kind of disagree a little bit with my Navy brethren here. So the Navy and the Air Force, they tend to man their arms, but in the Army, we arm our men. So I don't think it's going to be crazy cost. I don't think it's going to cost all that much money, but I'm kind of optimistic about this. We've always been a very reactive Army, and for my first time in 20 years, we're becoming a very proactive Army. The fact that we're even having these conversations, right, this is making us transition and pivot in the military. And we have a competitive advantage that our adversaries don't have, and that's the non-commissioned officer, right? I will always say that the non-commissioned officer is the competitive advantage. Our pacing threat doesn't have an NCO corps. Our acute threat doesn't have an NCO corps, right? So if we just take empiricism and common sense, then we can get to success. If you kind of distill empiricism and common sense to an Army perspective, that just comes down to training. So the theme to all of my answers to these questions is we just have to train to our adversary, right? Empower our non-commissioned officers, execute mission command, and you will have a competitive advantage against our adversary.
One quick
go ahead.
caveating point. Sorry, but that wasn't a reference to money. It was a reference to the failures through not executing properly.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So continuing on that vein, so in 2023, Brigadier General Weil stated during the Maneuver Warfighters Conference, and this is a direct quote, "If you remember nothing else, remember 8 minutes." What is 8 minutes? After you break squelch on your radio, you're going to learn 2 things in 8 minutes. How good was your MCOM, and how good are your adversary's EW soldiers? Fast forward 1 year and a couple of months later, based on the exponential growth of both ours and our adversary's technology, I would say that you now have 80 seconds. But 80 seconds for our adversaries to sense and geolocate you. How long you have to survive is really going to be based upon their kill chain of choice and weapon system that they choose to engage you, whether that be indirect fire, all the way up to tactical level, surface to surface weapon systems. So with that thought in mind, I'm going to ask the panel members, how do we ensure that our enlisted personnel receive comprehensive training in GEMSO and SEMA? And specifically, what specific skills and competencies are critical to the success in this domain? And I'll again start with Sergeant Major Egbula.
Thank you, Sergeant Major. So to answer the question, I would fall back on, I would say, practice makes perfect. So a little saying I like to tell my soldiers is like, when you're a baby, you can't even walk. But by the time you're an adult, you're able to run marathons. That's just because you have practice walking. So riflemen, they go out to the range, they practice marksmanship. So as signaleers, we have to practice GEMSO. So practice makes perfect. We need to get to these CTC rotations. We need to go to these FTXs. We need to have realistic training where instead of the commander just saying, hey, yeah, let's connect to the fiber, or hey, yeah, I want to go ahead and just get this done, make the sir happy, we need to inject interference. We need to inject problems with the communications. We need to inject real-world problems that our near-peer adversaries are going to give to us. Because if you're not doing realistic training, when you really get into it, you're not going to know what to do.
So in addition to that, something I tell my formation often is that, so in Ranger Regiment, it's a Ranger first mentality. It doesn't matter if you're infantryman, if you're EW, you're intel, it's Ranger first. So you got to focus on those big 5. And that's going to be, the main focus of it is via marksmanship, mobility, fitness, communications, and medical. You've got to be able to do that, and that's how you get hired into Ranger Regiment and continually have to work to be good at that. Additionally, though, when you're in the ARMIB, you're hired for a reason, and that's to provide that enabling function. So for EW, they have that challenge of what? They have to be an electronic warfare professional. So it's And why do they have to have it's not just, I say Ranger first, it should apply to all formations. We are providing an enabling capability at the tactical edge. And if the maneuver element you're supporting does not trust you, they are gonna find ways to not bring you out there or just say, give me your kit and I'll do it for you. So you absolutely need to continue to focus on being a fit warfighter to then obviously be entrusted to provide your capability to it. So, but it's gonna be the running theme for this, it's mastering the basics. You gotta be able to do all those things. Just because you're a cyber professional or an EW professional or signalier, you gotta still maintain those basics of being a soldier.
Yeah, I mean, set it off in NSW, you know, train how you fight because you are going to fight how you train. And so along the lines of what Bully was talking about, if you're not introducing what you will experience in the battlefield into your training situations, then you're setting yourself up for failure. I think that you have to do that, and it's something that if the commanders and the senior leaders in these large-scale exercises and all sorts of other events like that don't understand the capability, they're less likely to employ it. So there's got to be a constant press to push that knowledge forward and to help them understand why they should be incorporating that into it and not working around it.
Yeah, so same thing, training, right? I think comprehensive training, you have to have a contested EMS. And you don't need $1 gazillion worth of kit to do that, right? Just turn the system off. Run through your pace plan. Take the primary out, stress the alternate. Take the alternate out, stress the contingency. Have blackout windows, right? And then as far as specific skills, I think from a GEMSO perspective, whether you're SEMA, cyberspace, information advantage, Air Force, Navy, right? You have to provide situational awareness. We owe that to our commanders, right? So that's a specific skill. We have to be able to provide situational awareness. We also need to be able to identify deception actions, right? I don't think we're learning lessons in the Ukraine. I think we're observing lessons in the Ukraine, and that's of great benefit from multiple fronts. And then finally, right, we have to integrate multi-domain operations to achieve superiority, right? These are the 3 critical skills that I think have to come out of that. And from that, we should be able to have 4 deliverables that we could give to our commanders, right? We should develop a spectrum plan. We should be able to nominate and assign frequencies. We should be able to generate the joint communication electronics operating instructions, and then we should be able to develop the JERFL, right? We owe that to our soldiers. So a little ingenuity and innovation goes a long way. You don't have to have a crazy budget to get after these tasks.
So just to circle back around, you said all the things that the Spectrum Manager does. It just makes me really happy. So, you know, maybe I'll get a raise.
Yo, one team, one fight.
Exactly. So, but going back to skills and competencies, I believe, like you hit the nail on the head, Battle. Network design. You have to have a robust network design. So you have to be able to identify the interference and then be able to mitigate it. So you need a good and robust pace plan. So your pace can't just be variations of the same radio system. So, you know, the enemy has been watching us for years. They know what we're going to do. They know what we have, or they have an idea of what we're going to do, but they definitely know what we have, and they know its capabilities. So that way, we have to keep them guessing. We can't fall into the trap of complacency.
Okay. So all great answers. So I'm going to shift a little bit because we as an Army, and one of the benefits of having a joint panel here is we're never going to operate individually, no matter what we do. We are always going to operate in a joint environment with not only jointly, we're also going to operate with our coalition partners and allies. So my next question, well, I'll start with Sergeant Major Fouts, is how can we seamlessly integrate GEMSO and SEMA capabilities into joint and partner operations?
All right, well, I have yet to see it done seamlessly. I know that's the great challenge of it. And I think to start off with, focusing on doctrine, and I'm glad we started off the panel with that, of explaining the doctrine and helping understand just how the Army views it, but then understanding how our partner forces view it as well. And with that doctrine, we need to look at, has it evolved, has it changed? Because when we started doing this in the mid-2000s, we're working off old doctrine, old policy to which these capabilities did not exist. So we're going to need to continue to review and challenge those, and then ensure that we understand it. But then through that then is creating and working towards the actual baseline of what our training is and what we're actually doing to enable, again, like the capabilities that we're doing. And there was recently one of my peers put a great model out. He showed doctrine, baseline, and experience. And in the graph it showed during GWAT how it existed, where it, I don't have it here to show in this one, but it just in relation to understanding doctrine, what the baseline was then, and what the experience level. And he was applying this as 11 Alpha, as one of the battalion commanding leaders. And so I actually adapted that to show what the ARMID was doing. And really, when we started doing, a lot of our things didn't exist. So the doctrine didn't exist yet. The joint publics didn't exist yet. So that was almost nothing. Because we hadn't been doing it yet, there was no baseline. But we gained a lot of experience in doing it. And with that then, was that the right experience? It's hard to say. We definitely gained a lot of it, but now with GWAT gone and with definitely plenty of conflicts probably on the horizon, which we can get experience, we need to ensure that we know the doctrine and have a great baseline across the formation, so we're performing those functions the right way and then getting the great experience. So then tying that into it, just like right now, like SOF has been using certain equipment for a good while. Like Ruben here was great. We were talking about this. Is good reminiscing on. He was working on development of some key pieces of equipment that is now being fielded to the Army some 8 years later. So during one of the other panels, I heard like, hey, 10th Mountain is getting a piece of equipment. And like, that's great. We've been using that for a long time. What is their baseline on that? And so we can absolutely help that. So to seamlessly integrate, you have to start lowest levels, making sure you understand that equipment. And it's great that the user knows how to use it. You need to then integrate that into the maneuver element. How do you do that? Start it one bit at a time. How do we do that? As last year, there was an exercise we did out at Fort Huachuca, in which our EW went out and identified signals of interest, was able to direction find to it, and we brought a mortar team out from 275 and they put mortars on it. And they loved that. So it was one of the best experiences they had. They've never seen anything like that. They've never done that. They haven't heard anybody doing that. And that's been proliferating. And I know elements now are other, like 10th Mountain is about to set up that exercise to do that once they get their equipment and set. So it just keeps stepping up on one piece at a time until you're integrating it into larger exercises. And when those rock drills are going on, in the past, you get to the team, like this team, we're going to move into this area. They're walking you through what they're doing. They're starting here, they're going here, SP, and they're going to go in this formation, and our special equipment is X. But they don't lay into what kind of effect they're trying to do. In a lot of ways, that effect that they want to do is going to be white-carded. In the end, there's no way that's going to be seamlessly integrated into a real-world operation. So we need to get away from white-carding of anything, and we need to demonstrate these capabilities in the training environment. NTC, JRTC, all these training environments are providing us an adaptive enemy that's also employing, to their levels, higher levels of technology. And we're able to adapt to that, but we're no longer white-carding these things. We're employing the technology against an enemy, an adaptive enemy, and then when it comes down to it, and that's at the Army level, we're continuing to work with our counterparts, and I'm not going to steal thunder here, of how we're integrating the other capabilities from the other services into it. So once again, the theme, right, is just training, and it goes back to how I talked doctrine, creating a baseline. The experience is not going to be gained. We're going to gain experience on the battlefield. We need to have that experience and be prepared to do it when it's actually called the true operation.
Yeah, training critical. That I'll definitely circle back to that. I think two kind of different things with EW and with cyber. I think in the cyber world, you have U.S. Cybercom, who's acting as a joint training lead. We're already on the path to synchronizing capabilities across the joint force when it comes to cyber, because of the establishment of U.S. Cybercom and the efforts that they have going on there, with each service being responsible for providing forces to that capability and a kind of centralized place for managing the training and the qualifications and whatnot. I don't think that exists anywhere currently for EW. And I think that's going to be one of the that's kind of the long pole in the tent when it comes to the joint fight, is that common understanding, the common knowledge base, and the training. You start, and I think the way you get after that is training to the theory, because the theory, the different technologies in play will be common across the board. And so if you're trained to that, you can throw any operator into into a situation, and they should be able to pick it up with, you know, learning a few buttons and stuff. But if you're trained to systems in particular, then that's going to be a lot harder ask in the joint environment.
Yeah, so Kevin brought up a good point about seamless integration, right? But that's the great thing about being a professional in a profession. We acknowledge that we will never achieve perfection, but in the pursuit of perfection, we can get excellent, right? So on that pursuit of perfection, I think the way we seamlessly integrate is through planning, prioritization, integration, synchronization, and deconfliction. Really just good staff work so that the men and women at the tactical edge are able to execute GEMSO operations. And then the challenges that exist in joint operations, right? That's interoperability and standardization issues. But then I'll go back to what I said originally. We're having these conversations. We're being a proactive Army. So even though that exists, I'm super optimistic about that. And then just the complexity of joint operations, right? How often do I get to work with my Navy brethren or my Air Force brethren or my space brethren, right? But again, we're having these conversations from the Pentagon all the way down to the team leader level. So very optimistic. And then resource constraints and technology gaps. But again, that just comes down to innovation, right? Ingenuity and innovation. Do the best you can with what you have. Just because you don't have equipment doesn't mean that you should be sitting in your office and you shouldn't be training. Figure something out, because you're never going to rise to a level of performance that supersedes your greatest day in training.
I think that last point there, I think, is key, and that's where training to the technologies themselves and not to specific systems or equipment become critical, because there's a lot of off-the-shelf solutions or things that people can figure out on their own if they have the right knowledge base to build off of.
All very, very good responses. And so it highlights where we're going to go next on this panel. And so from the joint EW viewpoint, the Navy and in the Air Force, failure in the EMS has lethal consequences. We as an Army are just starting to realize this. Take example. If you fail to dominate in the EMS and use your advanced ES equipment in the Navy, that petty officer who sits in the CIC, who's not able to protect the USS Carl Vinson from an anti-ship missile using advanced ES capability, is going to result in the loss of an aircraft carrier and 6,000 sailors. That has lethal consequences. Translate over into our Air Force partners and our Air Force brethren. If you can't dominate, whether you're a backseater in some aircraft or whether the pilot themselves using advanced ES systems can't dominate the electromagnetic spectrum, that aircraft is going to get shot down. You're going to lose the aircraft, you're going to possibly lose the pilot, and you're unable to actually achieve the actual mission objectives, whatever that was, either deep strike or counter the enemy IADs. So the Army has shifted from coin to LISCO. And let's be honest, as we've looked, and the panel members have already highlighted this, in a coin fight, I was not worried about whether you're in Afghanistan or whether you're in Iraq. I wasn't worried about being geolocated by the Taliban or AQI. I didn't have to worry about our long transmissions that I had on the radio. It didn't have lethal consequences. We still had to deal with RCIEDs, but that wasn't triggered by our MCON and our understandings of the EMS. And so now we have a better understanding of how we have to dominate in the electromagnetic spectrum, specifically our ES, to be able to protect doing EP and the lethal effects of that on our combat power. So what I'll transition to is my next question really focuses on what challenges exist in coordinating all these efforts across the different branches and different services. And I'll start with Master Chief.
Yeah, so I think common understanding that precisely what you just highlighted of the risk that's involved with not fully understanding the electromagnetic spectrum and the different capabilities that come to bear with that, and what the enemy has in their say in that. I think, in combat, the surface warfare officers who are not, electromagnetic spectrum professionals fully understand by it because they know that they live and die by their ability to operate in and through it. I can't speak to the Army, so I don't know if that's the same for the different combat, the different warfare areas within the Army. But I know coming like a common shared understanding of that and ensuring that we're not stepping on each other in the EMS as well, like, as we're operating in and by and through it, is going to be critical to our success. And I think that the way you get to that kind of circles back again to the beginning with how do we scale this into large scale exercises where we are operating together, seeing what each service is bringing to the fight in that environment, without white carding it and without doing the hand wave that, yeah, okay, there was interference introduced here, white carded. We have to actually do it. We have to actually put ourselves through those paces.
Can you give me the question one more time? This is an off-the-cuff question. I wasn't prepared for this one.
Yep. So what challenges exist coordinating these efforts across different branches and services?
I really think that is just a shift in culture. I heard the Sergeant Major of the Army say the other day in an interview, he said, I've been in combat, but I've never been in war, right? And I never thought about it from that perspective. So, and he's spot on. I've never been in combat. I've never been in war. I've only been in combat. I think so we have to shift our culture and appreciate the gravity of the threat that large-scale combat operations highlight, and we empower our leaders, we execute mission command, and we embrace innovation while fostering failing in training so that we can learn from ourselves.
So some of the challenges we face are, I would say, interoperability. So, and that's just not, it happens at multiple levels, like even within the Signal Corps. So we got one unit with this new piece of equipment, this other unit using this other piece of equipment. Across our branches, Army has equipment that cannot talk to Navy equipment, or we have one radio that the Air Force can use if they want to talk to our ground troops. So we have to be interoperable enough. That's a huge challenge. We have to be interoperable enough that we're able to talk to ourselves before we go into a large-scale combat operations where we're fighting with Britain, we're fighting with France, we're fighting with Germany against a common enemy. Right? These countries have totally different radio systems. They use, not totally different, but they use different spectrum bandwidths. They might, their commander might want to use something that interferes with something we really want to use. So how do we get around that? So in order to get around that, we have to work together. We have to breed familiarity. I think I said that right? Yeah. So we have to work with each other. We have to know what our partners have and how to work with them. Understand the trade-offs, like, hey, if these guys are coming to the fight, these people are coming to the fight, we're going to have to use this, we're going to have to use that. And just understanding the limited resources we have, because spectrum is a finite resource. There's only so much, nobody's making any more of it, and everybody's using it. So it's very valuable. So SEMA, GEMSO, they need a seat at the table. They need to be heard by the commander so he understands the trade-offs when he's picking a course of action.
Yep, so I've definitely seen conflict or is really expectation management issues and communication issues when trying to integrate across the different forces. I know the real example, actually almost 10 years ago now, the Army commander wanted a desired effect on a target, real-world target that we were going to. And we would communicate it and say, this is what we can do in this way, but we knew it wasn't going to have the full-scale effect that we needed, so we relied on an Air Force platform to provide this to us. Again, this is unclassified, so that's why it's still wave tops on this discussion. But the Air Force like, yep, we can do that. And on the target, the effect happened. They considered it success. The Army commander got back AR, which just like giving it to his EW guy, who was the Army guy, and they're like, no, they applied the effect. It happened that way. It's like, no, it did not. This was still happening. These things were happening. So it just demonstrated multiple levels, different terminology, different effects, and at different scales. And it had never been done in a training environment. So this was something of, hey, we're going to integrate this first time on a real-world operation. And so it didn't affect the mission still went down. Everything was still a success, thankfully. There was no cost. There was no cost affected on that one of life or resources. But it just demonstrated right there, like, we need to integrate this in before we do these things. We need to run this through real-world mission, real-world training, and demonstrate this capability so that it's seamlessly integrated when we actually need it.
All right. So I'm going to move to another follow-up with this one. So for Sergeant Major General to start us off with, what metrics, or indicators should we use to assess the effectiveness of enlisted personnel in GEMSO and SEMA roles? And then secondly, how can we ensure continuous improvement, because we always have to get better, and achieve that operational excellence that you talked about before?
Yeah, so I'm not going to differentiate between a GEMSO or a SEMA, NCO or a soldier. The Army got this right? It's attributes and competencies. This is how we measure the effectiveness of a non-commissioned officer or an enlisted soldier. And then leadership potential, right? My only job is to make sure that the Army that I leave behind is better than the Army that I got, right? So when you are a staff sergeant, are you performing better than I performed in a staff sergeant? If the answer is yes, I am doing my job. If the answer is no, I need to find a mirror and I need to reevaluate. And then physical fitness and readiness is another huge metric, right? And then this is to steal Kevin's point. I heard Sergeant Major Brett Johnson talk about the Ranger Big Five years ago, and I stole it because he said in his talk that I could steal it, right? So when I say readiness, mirroring what Sergeant Major Johnson was talking about was marksmanship, medical training, small unit tactics, mobility, and communication. Throughout my career, I've encountered a lot of 17 Echoes, or back then 29 Echoes, right, that felt like they didn't have to do these things, either because of their job or because they were above it. But back to Kevin's point, right, you're a soldier first. That's what I was taught in basic training. First you're an infantryman, then you're whatever else it is that you go on to AIT to do. And soldier development and mentorship, to my earlier point, right, are you ensuring that the Army that you leave behind is better than you, right? That's my definition of legacy. Not what I've accomplished, but where I've helped the Army get to. And then how do we ensure continuous improvement? I think that's through structured and adaptive training. I think it's through emphasizing leadership and mentorship, not just talking about it. I was a Sergeant First Class promotable before I got my first counseling statement, right? That was my journey through, or excuse me, not my first counseling statement, my first senior leader counseling. God, I'm having a brain fart right now. Why can't I think of what I'm trying to think of right now?
The lights.
My senior rater. I was a Sergeant First Class promotable before I got my first senior rater counseling, right? So we talk about leadership and mentorship, but not every organization builds a culture that really believes in it. I think we foster a culture of innovation and adaptability, which we've already talked about at length, so I won't beat it up anymore. And then I think we have clear and structured career paths. I was talking to Sergeant Major Jesse Potter about this the other day in the hallway. That hasn't always been the case for the 17 Echo or the 29 Echo. We've been kind of just yo-yoed around, and we've been doing what the Army tells us to do, and we're soldiers. That's what we should do. But as we get after retention, right, if we outline clear and structured career paths, then it's going to really help with our retention. And Sergeant Major Potter, to his credit, he's got that bucket and it's full and he's ready to execute. And that's all I'll say on that.
So for measure the effectiveness, that just goes down to MOPS and MOS, measures of performance, measures of effectiveness. So I think I brought up a point earlier in the introduction that riflemen, they have a very specific MOPS and MOS. Like, hey, you go to the range, you shoot 30, you're a sharpshooter, you shoot 36, you're an expert. So to get after that, we should do the same thing as signalers. We should do the same thing in GEMSO cells. hey, we're going to the CTC, hey, we're going to this FTX, I'm going to introduce this type of interference. Is this unit able to identify it? Is this unit able to properly react to it? Master Chief said something earlier that was really good. He said, inexpensive lessons learned. So when you're playing in the backyard, that is the time to get these bumps and mows in. This is the time to get the experience where it doesn't cost anything. But, you know, once LISCO happens, once we're in the real fight, that's when it's going to cost. That's when it's going to become really expensive in terms of equipment, manpower, money.
So there's two parts where I look at measuring the metrics of effectiveness. So I've mentioned having smaller exercises. So when we run through our training cycles, my individual platoons, and even down at squad level, they're validating it through their individual training exercises or just training before they go to the larger exercises. So we're validating that they are conducting their technical job, their enabling job, whatever it is. So that's one level and being assessed by the leadership and oversight from us to ensure that they are effective at their job. When you get to NTC or JOTC or the larger exercise, the 05 level exercises or 06 or higher, I am not looking then to do their job. I already know they can do their job. The higher up commanders are looking to ensure that they're applying the effects, but I am measuring how they're integrating with the maneuver elements at that point in time. So I know they do their job, that's why they're there. I have full confidence they're doing that, but at that point, I am ensuring that they're integrating and providing that effect effectively to the maneuver element. So.
Yeah, so I think very, very, very similar take on the EW side. You kind of have to demonstrate it through actually like utilizing the capabilities and showing that you're proficient with it. I think it's a little bit different for me in cyber to some extent. There's been talks in many different circles about how are we ensuring that we're retaining the right people? How are we ensuring that they have the right level of readiness and skills and capabilities? A lot of these a lot of the skills are, if you're not using them, you lose them. And so how are you ensuring that you are the right person for the fight, that you are ready, and that you are continuing to improve on your position and your knowledge base, becoming the master of your trade. And there's been talks. I think probably one of the closest things I've seen to it is like the instantiations of PCTE and systems like that, where, you know, in my mind we take a whole different look at how we track and manage careers in the cyber profession with like a lifelong, while you're in service, system that tracks what your qualifications are, how current you are, what levels of you know, are you a beginner, a senior, or a master operator? Something like that kind of follows you, that you can quickly reference and pull up and know what your current force disposition is, and your current readiness. I think something like that would be critical moving forward.
So we've been here for coming on close to almost 45 minutes, and we've had some great discussion. We've had some great topics, and as I'm going to go back down through the group just as your kind of wrap up thought of the one thing. So if you could have everybody as they walk out of here, what would be the one thing that you would want them to take away with them? And so I'll start it from the pieces. So as we gave the questions, some of the questions we were going to ask and the themes, so that way you had the opportunity to look at some of this. But what I really took away, and actually to go to Master Chief's point, and hearing it said that way, is it's not about the piece of equipment. It's not about the capability. It's understanding the science behind the actual piece. And so, we've even demonstrated this in National Training Center rotations, where we've had individuals that were given a piece of equipment and they were utilizing the piece of equipment, and the piece of equipment broke. And then we're sitting there, and we're sitting there as the OCs with them, and they're like, okay, I don't know what to do. Well, you actually do know what to do, just don't utilize the piece of equipment. What is the science behind what you're doing? Here's a command line, here is this piece, do it manually. And I think as we look at this, sometimes we look to get the material solution, look to get the, use the word that we like to stay away from. I don't need a career field. I don't need professionals to be script kiddies. I need individuals to be able to have the knowledge of the science behind what they're actually doing. So when I have to execute, as Sergeant Major General said, when I have to execute my PACE plan, I can very quickly be able to continue to execute and provide the effect that my commander needs to have, regardless of whether my primary piece of equipment is operational. I have an ability to be able to achieve that effect. So that's what I would say from my viewpoint, that if there's anything to take with you with mastering the basics, is you have to be able to understand the science behind what you actually do. Pass to you, Sergeant Major.
So the thing to take away is, I'm sure we're all aware, we work in, if not the most important domain, one of the most important domains. So without us, the commander can't get the job done. All right, so we have excelled in our field for years, but nobody here, or very few of us here, have experience on the fight we're about to get into. So it's a whole different world. It's a whole different game moving forward. All right. So we have a smart and determined enemy. They have been watching us for years. They have been taking notes for years. They know where we're strong. They know where we're weak. And they're putting money in an area that is going to hurt us. If your unit is not cyber ready, your unit will fail. So just the thing to think about, just the thing to leave the room with, us as leaders, we have to reiterate to our commanders the importance of spectrum management. We have to understand the importance of operating in a joint environment, working together, because we can't get through this fight alone. We're gonna need our sister branches, we're gonna need our partner nations to fight this near-peer threat.
So I think this is an extremely exciting time for EW and cyber. Like there was a time 10 years ago, less than that, where EW was viewed at by his commands as just an extra worker. And that's sad to say, but the commands didn't know what to do with their EW personnel. So they just stuck them in jobs that just needed somebody to do. And that is not gonna be the case now. Like right now with the massive focus on fielding the proper equipment to all the divisions and out there to formations, the 17 Echoes to do their job. Everything we've been talking about, the challenges of integrating and demonstrating your worth and why the maneuver forces need you is just that much more important. But because of that, again, this is an exciting time to be here because it is like the military, like you are being demanded to do your job now. I hope that affects, like we have lost far too many professionals that came in the Army to do EW and weren't utilized. That's one of the main things people get out for. They're not doing their job and they're not surrounded by like-minded individuals and they don't have a good operational culture within their units, and that is changing. Like look how much emphasis, how much this conference grows every year, and how about the immense focus of the military on EW, cyber, signaling, all those kinds of things. So definitely excited. Appreciate being here and getting to talk on this panel. Hope you guys got something out of this. We'll see you around soon, especially next year.
Yeah, so I have full faith that when the time comes, the men and women of the United States of America is going to rise to the occasion, win the fight. My hope is that through further investment into this capability space, that we win it at a lot less of an expensive cost to the U.S. people, and again, not money necessarily is what I'm talking about. To the folks sitting in this room, right? I think where we're going to really make our money is in our efforts in phase 0 pre-conflict. And if we're not engaged early and in that phase, and demystifying what these capabilities are and what they can bring to bear through policy and then also through like a knowledge-based campaign of employing them and incorporating them into regular battle rhythms of how we're conducting business. I think that's going to be key to potentially even preventing that conflict. And then in the event that it does rise to that point, I think it'll be critical in giving us the tactical edge and a more lethal advantage in a LISCO conflict.
I'll leave you with, as a leader, right, it is your duty to be the change agent that allows your soldier to discover a level of greatness that they previously thought was unattainable. That is your duty as a leader in this profession of arms, and I hope that you take that away from this.
So with that, that's going to conclude the formal portion of our panel. And so we have, according to the big screens right here, roughly about 20 minutes to take questions from the audience.
Thank you. We do have some questions. The first question is for Command Sergeant Major Foltz. Is there a role for a command warrant officer in the Ranger Regiment? How would that individual work with the senior NCOs?
Is Chief Baker out there somewhere? He hit me with us a few days ago. There is not currently a command chief warrant officer position, but yeah, that's funny. I had to have fed this question through on you. It's something that I'm looking at, and not unlike the 11 side, 11 series. It wouldn't not unlike actual combat arms focus. It would be the question was driven towards this tech focus through signaling, and so currently there is not. This just came out last week, so I have not even had a chance to talk to the regimental commander about it or even my battalion commander counterpart. So check back with me, look me up, email me, and see if I got a follow up in a couple weeks on that one.
Thank you. Next question. How does the Army's shift to the division as unit of action impact SEMA and GEMSO operations?
So I guess I'll start with this one. So as many of you know, with the publishing of the R-Struck, some of the biggest changes to the force structure and the level of capability has significantly changed. So previously, at the brigade combat team level, all that was a staff planning element that had the staff planning pieces, and you had that down into the battalions. And then in the force structure eventually came with the establishment of the MICOs. They added an EW platoon at the brigade combat team level. And now with the R-Struck coming and the shift of the focus to the division level, the EW platoons will still remain in the BCTs, but the Army has invested in EW companies at the division level and then also at the corps, but designed to be downward reinforcing. So they have that capability resident now there, which expands across the entire division's battle space of what they're actually able to achieve, be it ES or be it EA or even EP. And some of our things that we look at, and some of you that I've talked to during this conference in the last couple of days, one of the things we forget is when we talk about EW, there is this shift in understanding that I need to focus on electronic attack. And so I would say that sometimes we forget about the other aspects of what ES enables. And we kind of hit it a little bit on this panel. Sergeant Major Foltz hit it with what the Rangers did out there at Fort Huachuca. But we sometimes forget that if you use EA, if my capability for EA doesn't exceed the range of the enemy indirect capability, whatever that is, either artillery or missile, all I do is turn on a giant target. And so we forget sometimes that we can utilize capability, especially now at the division level, that I have ES and I have those additional sensors across the division battle space that enable lethal kill chains, just like I talked about with all the way back to Brigadier General Vial's comment. The lethal kill chains of being able to use ES, and then those same professionals are then able to turn around, and all I got to do is turn around 180 degrees, well, maybe 45, depending on how my forces are arrayed, to be able to use that same capability that we've now built into the divisions and the corps to be able to conduct electronic protection, to be able to see ourselves and to be able to deal with our MCOM to make us a smaller target, to increase the adversary's lethal keychains. So hopefully that gets it going if anyone else wants to.
I think electronic protection, and we're observing this in the Ukraine right now. Every time President Zelensky gets on and has any type of speech or is advocating, right, he constantly is saying protection is the most important warfighting function. I cannot do maneuver, I cannot do artillery, I cannot conduct intelligence operations in the absence of protection. So yes, the EA, the OCO, phase 0 things, these are very important. But as we endure and we transition from movement to maneuver and back to movement with artillery, electronic protection is critically important.
Do we have any more?
Yes, thank you. Do you have any further thoughts on what else is needed to provide SEMA capabilities and teams to help the Army reach its vision for SEMA?
So I think I mentioned it before. It's just a seat at the table. So TechNet is a great opportunity for all our vendors and all our stakeholders to come out and showcase what they have, what they can do. It's our job as leaders to go back to our commanders and say, hey, I saw this high-speed piece of equipment that probably meets your needs. So we have to go back and show the commander what we can do. Because for the longest, we said it earlier, you know, we were like the unwanted stepchild sitting at the table, you know. They didn't
Speak
really
for yourself. I was always wanted everywhere I went.
Okay. So we were sitting at the table. We didn't really have a voice. They didn't know what we did, or when we had the opportunity to showcase what we could do, you know, we didn't do it properly, or they just didn't even want to see it because they were focused on, you know, completing the mission with the highest rate possible, the highest possible score. So, you know, they didn't want any problems. They didn't want any like EW problems or anything. They wanted everything to run smoothly. But that's not the case. You know, in the real world, it's not going to run smoothly. It's not running smoothly for the Russians. It's not running smoothly for Hamas. So how can we expect it to run smoothly for us? So we have to be visible. We have to showcase what we have. We have to showcase what we can do. And when we have the opportunity, we have to produce. We have to, you know, wow.
Establish that baseline. Whenever, it was actually elements from 101st that came and visited us a few months ago, which is actually, they had some great lessons learned that they took and they just demonstrated JRTC, so it's very cool to see how quickly they integrated things. One of their questions was, they were concerned when they get a 17 Echo right out of the schoolhouse, they're throwing them right in the formation, expecting them to perform their job. So there was zero integration for it. So you need to protect your soldiers on that. Don't allow that opportunity where you throw them right from the schoolhouse, essentially into the fire, or into that reconnaissance team, whatever they're going out with. So you need to establish that baseline at your unit to ensure that once they're out of the schoolhouse, they get the proper training and integration into your formation before you employ them. Because it just takes that one failure with that reconnaissance unit, and they're never going to want that again, or they're not going to ever treat their people the right way. So establish that proper baseline.
Yeah, you bring up, it's onboarding, right? The way you onboard personnel, right? So there's no one-size-fits-all solution, but you look across any Fortune 50, 100, 500 company, to include the United States Army, the way you onboard your personnel is so critical in how your commander will use that person throughout their tenure in that organization. So it tends to get overlooked, but onboarding, I mean, it's leader business, and it's critically important.
I think also ensuring that the training that they're getting before they get there sets them up for success, ensuring that they have like real-world ability to integrate, like they can demonstrate a value add when they do get there. That was critical for us, operating with Navy SEALs who didn't fully understand what we brought to the table, and when they're contemplating weights and chalk loads, and what does it cost us to add you to the chalk load? What do you bring to the fight? And it was ensuring that we set our folks up for success by training them properly before they got integration into the SEAL teams, so that they were value add the second they got to the team.
So I'll add one additional piece of this. So one of the things, to make SEMA the more effective is, and the panel has already talked about it, we have to be able, if we don't rise to our training, we're not going to be successful in combat. And so I'll use an example. And so we have yet to integrate SEMA completely into our training rotations. I will use an example. So 1st Infantry Division, 1st Brigade Combat Team, they went out, they created EW weapons platoons. So they took EW professionals at the time, they put them in a piece of equipment, they paired them with 13 Fox Field Artillery. So in the National Training Center, for those of you familiar, as you end towards the end of your rotation, you go into the assault. So you go into the whale, and so for those of you that have actually been out there, you know how critical that training event is, and for the training audience. And so you had the EW weapons platoon was employed, and they had gotten to the point through that rotation that every time the OPFOR transmitted on the radio, every time they keyed their mic, they geolocated them down to a 10-digit grid. And with the integration of the fires element, through the training, they had the OC right there. They would fire an Excalibur and they would kill a tank. They would kill a Bradley or, the Viz mods. They would kill the enemy piece. Within 10 minutes, they decimated a brigade combat team down to a company minus. To the point that they actually paused, came out, told the EW platoon, you guys are phenomenally successful. Thank you. You may now leave the box. And they kicked them out of the box. So the difference is that they weren't able, because the focus was the training audience. And I use that as an example because it is very effective. But what we have yet to do in that space is actually force a maneuver commander to fight in that type environment. I think back to my time, prior to 9/11, doing some JRTC rotations when we actually did full-scale combat operations. You would have an entire infantry company that the OC would walk up and say, go to the PIHA, you're gone. You'd wipe out an entire infantry company off the battlefield, and they'd be gone for 3 days. And it would force that commander to actually fight in that degraded status. We have yet to do that because they don't see that as the training objective. I think after some of the things that we've experienced in the Ukraine, that some of the focus has shifted to exactly that. That is the actual training effect that needs to be achieved. That's the training audience. How do you fight when you can't talk? How do you fight when you have all these digital systems and all these other things and you haven't dealt with your MCOM to be able to actually function? And so I think that is going to be one of the things that as we move forward, how do we truly embrace SEMA? And then, as to many of the said on the panel, that you're actually really getting a true seat at the table in those discussions and being able to employ those lethal capabilities.
Yeah, but I think, so to your point, we're also in a good place, right? Because when, you started this before me, but I've been doing this 13 years now. If we look at what 25th ID is doing, what the 101st is doing, what 10 Mountain is doing, like the commanders are buying into this, right? But I think to truly utilize the capabilities of the SEMA platoon or the EW company, it's going to require a lot of humility from guys like us, right? When I went through the course, I was taught how to be a PAT clerk for the Air Force, right? Hey, this is a JTAR, go do staff work, fill it out, send it to the Air Force, hope and pray you get an asset. Hey, you just did EW, here's your gold sticker, right? But now I have specialists coming out of schoolhouses that are blowing my doors off. They're like, hey, Sarge, did you think about this? And I'm like, hey, who taught you that? And they're like, oh, we learned this at the schoolhouse, man. And I'm like, okay, hey, get all these guys together. Let's have a question. We're going to do SEMA 101 with the old Sergeant Major, and we're going to figure this out, right? Because I got leadership down somewhat. I understand how the Army works better, but there's a lot of kids coming out of these schoolhouses that have a better grasp of radio frequency propagation that I was taught or trained to, right? So with an amalgamation of all those different skill sets, right, and a dash of humility, we can really do amazing things with the SEMA platoon and the EW company.
Thank you. We have one more question from the audience. Do you have any thoughts on training costs, as cyber training almost entirely relies on industry standard and fighting against the economic disadvantages of cyber training for soldiers? Most cyber training that yields results, career and operations-wise, is out of reach for many enlisted soldiers, and there's currently no large-scale model for training in the Army as opposed to outside organizations. The units or individual soldiers are responsible for paying, which raises a large issue financially for quality training.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take this one first. And so I didn't think I would get the opportunity to actually say this in a public forum finally. There's an element, so yes, there is training, but there's also an element of self-development. And also, this audience, the bulk of this audience are non-commissioned officers. The biggest drawback of 9/11 and COIN is we outsourced the non-commissioned officer, period. Underline it, quote me on it, I will say it again. We outsourced the non-commissioned officer. So the specific thing as we highlight, we have to do, yes, there are, I'm not disparaging our industry partners and the wonderful training that they have to actually get to that level. But we don't have to do that. The Non-Commissioned Officer Corps has been training our own through OJT and excellence for centuries. That's what we've been doing. That's what the inherent structure of the non-commissioned officer, that's what we were created for. So I actually say that in that aspect that sometimes we actually have to look within and what can we train our own, and then also there's a little bit of self-development. Get the book out, read the article, do the actual research, teach yourself. It's not, it's great to go to some of these training events. They're great training things, but sometimes there's a little bit of self-development. You got to teach yourself. And some of our best individuals that we look at why you are so good at what you do across all of our formations is probably the guy who's got his head in the book or is out there on the internet, depending on where in the internet, actually learning to actually do something the right way or legal way.
Yeah, and then that also, though, goes to Kevin's point of establish the baseline, right? So again, throughout my 13-year journey, I've encountered a lot of non-commissioned officers that just need a little mentorship. But when we talk, it's I want to go from 0 to large-scale, congested, joint, Air Force, cyber. Okay, here's a compass, shoot it back, azimuth. I'm a cyber guy. What are you talking about, compass? Okay, so if we don't have any kit, then let's get after physical fitness and let's get after small unit tactics, because if I'm struggling with small unit tactics, that if somebody does give me kit and I have to go out and in place said kit and employ kit, then I'm probably gonna have a problem, right? As an OC, I used to get tons of Augie E7s and you're like, hey man, here's your 10-digit grid cord, get after this. So to your point where we outsource the non-commissioned officer, and it's only supposed to take 45 minutes to get to, said talk. And 3 hours later, I'm calling them on the radio and I'm like, hey, where are you at? And they're like, I don't know, man, I'm in the box. Should I go left or right? I'm like, hey, left or right's not a cardinal direction. I think we're in a bad place right now, Sarge. Right? So train to what you have. If you don't have the kit, then master physical fitness and small unit tactics and mobility and become an expert on all the communication in your arms room so that when you do get that kit, it's a 2-week learning curve. It's not a 2-year learning curve.
So I'd say, so this is actually a task my cyber PL's out there somewhere, I don't know where he's at, but if he came to me and told me that the guys were paying for the training out of their pocket, I would be highly concerned with that, because and we have a fantastic educational counselor, and we find ways all the time to get them the training. Well, it was like, hey, if you want this training, what's your goal? What is your end state? Is it going to apply towards the mission? And we agree with that, then absolutely we're going to work towards getting actual training for that ranger and for the other rangers to improve the formation, improve the capability at Ranger Regiment. It's for self-development, I'm going to push them to education counselor and get it. But through the training that we're actually doing also within the regiment, we're working with programs, and there's programs like actually even at Huachuca, and there's certain, and even around the Fort Moore area, we're working with the universities that they're getting credit towards degrees from the training that we're doing inside of the regiment. So part going back to it of, that concerns me if someone is just paying out of pocket all the time, because I know of so many ways that you can use tuition assistance, or through the Army with the Ignite program, through like, there's so many things that the soldiers can get the skills paid for by the Army. And I don't mean out of your actually like GI Bill, but while you're active duty, there are many options. You just got to explore and reach out and find those programs to get those things paid for.
Also to caveat on that, the Army does have like a lot of programs. It got COOLs, got TA, a lot of stuff they can do. We as leaders have to look at it as an investment. So yes, this soldier wants to go out and get this high-speed training that's going to take like 4 weeks for them to do, but we don't want to do that because we're going to head into the box in a month or two. But you have to look at it as an investment. You send this soldier to this training. That soldier hopefully has enough time to come back and train the rest of the unit, so it just propagates. We're a highly technical field. So yeah, we can do push-ups, we can do sit-ups, we can shoot a back azimuth, but if we don't have the technical skills to do our jobs, you know, we're not really signals, we're riflemen.
Yeah, right, also, agreed. But, you know, this stuff, and then back to Kevin's point, right? So define the requirement, write the ons, write the JUONs. We were sitting in the cyber 10-year happy birthday, and they were, you know, poking at us because all the warrant officers were up there, right? Because the warrants are writing it. And I jokingly said, yeah, that's because the non-commissioned officers are out training the force. We don't have time to write this. I'll never miss an opportunity to jab my warrant officer brethren. But that's the thing, right? The non-commissioned officers have to sit down, define the requirement, right? If you don't have the equipment, write the ons, write the JUON. Try. You're probably going to fail 80% of the time, and you're not going to get it. But if it meets a line of effort and your commander's into it, then get after it. Start making small distances, small differences, build that momentum, capture quick wins, and then build on that to get bigger and better things.
That was our final question for the panel. Please welcome Mike Black back to the stage.
Wow, what an amazing panel. The NCOs never cease to amaze me. I appreciate all that you guys shared with us today. We went through a lot of things on the GEMSO and SEMA. I took a couple of notes here that I just really want to highlight. You guys did set the stage with the doctrine, and I appreciate that baseline. We talked about how we operate in a contested environment. And you know, some of the other takeaways, I mean, you know, remember 8 minutes, but it's now 80 seconds, okay? So things are happening a lot faster. Practice makes perfect, and he gave that analogy, and it's something that you can easily remember, that, you know, you start out walking, but when you're an adult, you'll be able to do that marathon, so continue to practice. The PACE plan, you foot stomp that. We all know what that is, you know, primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency. Attributes and competencies. I did learn some other things about MOPS and MOs today, so I appreciate that. I'm Air Force, and you mentioned that several times today, but joint fight here. Inexpensive lessons learned, understand the science, reiterate the importance of spectrum management, efforts in the zero phase, and be the change agent. How about a round of applause for this amazing panel? In lieu of a gift, speaker gift, we're going to make a donation to the Signal Cyber Corps Historical Museum on all of your behalfs. Now we have lunch coming up, so please note this is going to be your final opportunity to go out and visit our exhibitors and thank them for their participation in this, and make sure you get by the climate-controlled tent there to see those exhibitors. There's several, well, 60 or so in there. We were able to add to that, so make sure you get by there and see that. Enjoy the break. We're going to get back here at 12:45 for our final keynote with Lieutenant General Maria Barrett, Commanding General of Army Cyber. Again, thank you.